of the Brookline Asian American Family Network, and I wanted to welcome you to our third annual event to celebrate the winners of our essay contest. This is so exciting that it's our third annual essay. A bit about Baffin, if you're not familiar with us, we are a group that was formed to support the needs of Asian and Asian American students in the Brookline school system. We've been around for, 8 years now, and sort of got reactivated about 6 or 7 years ago. Some of you might know us from our Lunar New Year event or other events that we've held. I wanted to, and so this is our third annual essay contest, and I wanted to acknowledge and thank the woman who made this possible, who you'll be hearing from in a couple minutes, Shulan Chang. Shulan literally rescued this because the person who organized this last year, Teresa Chang, moved to San Francisco on us. And we were facing not being able to have this, and Shulan stepped up to the plate and said, I will do it, and she did, and she got more in prizes and more participants, and it's been incredible. So I really want to thank her for doing this. It's not possible without her. Will acknowledge the rest of the dignitaries in the room, but I did want to say thank you also to our longtime partner in crime in organizing these events, the Brookline Department of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. They've been so supportive of Baffin. It's been great. And Caitlin Haynes, representing that office, is here tonight. So that's all I have. The only other thing is if you'd like to sign up for the Baffin listserv, which is the primary way we communicate, there's a sign-up sheet right outside the door. And have pizza, and there'll be cake. And Shulan, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. I think there are more stragglers that are going to be coming in, but Gigi, thank you very much for the acknowledgement. My name is Shulan Chang, and Brookline has been my home since 22 years. I moved here from Europe with 2 boys. He was 5 years old, and the older one was 16. And they both attended Brookline High School, just like many of you that are here today. On behalf of the steering committee, 4 of whom are here today, Chi Wu, Alicia Xu, Linda Louie, and Christiania Sulkit, I'm very honored to welcome you to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And there's all these words, BAFN and AAPI and all this, it is tongue twisters. Anyway, and unfortunately, Superintendent Andrew Bott was supposed to be here, but I think maybe he got jet lag or something and he had to go home. But thank you very much, Headmaster Anthony Mayer, for being with us today. Also Brian Poon, Mr. Cheng Fu-Tseng, and of course the amazing Li Hua Shorter, with whom I don't know what we would do without you, because you helped us so much recruiting the students, getting the students motivated to participate in the contest.
Don't retire!
No, never. We won't let her. So here at Honeyman Hall, surrounded by centuries of great books and manuscripts, we invite you to listen to the voices of the youngest writers, winners of the 2018 Asian American Student Essay Contest. So a little bit of background. I'm going to touch on what Chi-Chi just said. The Brookline Asian American Family Network was created to support the needs of Asian American students. And the organization has been working for many years to increase the representation of Asian American teachers in our town. And as parents, we know that our teachers are vital role models, mentors, and counselors to our children. Thank you very much. A few years ago, parents and educators realized that there needed to be a way to recognize the opinions, the experiences, and the voices of our youth. And it is for that reason that this unique award was created, because, you know, overall we think this is a great community to live in. But it's not to say, and we know from reading these essays, that there are not issues of belonging, identity, prejudice, and racism that face our children too. So I volunteered to help organize this event, you know, half a year ago when Teresa Chen decided to leave for California, sunny California, because last year's event was so inspiring to me. When I heard Hiyun Rothman and Rachel Percy and Emily Zhu read their essays, I was really, really impressed and very, very moved. This year we put out a call in early January for essays, and on the theme, every year the theme is the same: what it means to be an Asian American. And the deadline was February the 12th. Now, starting February the 1st, I started checking, you know, the BAFN Google Gmail inbox, thinking, you know, quite excited to say, oh my God, there must be lots and lots of essays, you know, just flooding in. Well, there was nothing. February 1st, nothing. February 5th, three essays in the space of 1 hour. Then I started getting optimistic. 2 days later, very pessimistic. I started thinking, oh my God, why did I volunteer for this? This is so stressful. We have 3 awards and we have 3 writers. You know, this is really terrible. So there was a whole week with no more essays. And finally, at the last 2 hours before deadline, before midnight, you know, there was a situation of at 10 o'clock, do I want to go to sleep or do I want to stay up for another 2 hours? A flood of essays came in. One after the other, ping, 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 ping. Anyway, Chi-Chi was right. She told me, don't worry about it, Shulan. Teenagers procrastinate. And I was right, but there are a lot of parents and teachers here, so you know. Anyway, before I announce the winners of the essay contest, I'd like to introduce our brilliant judges. Dr. Lloyd Gelino. He isn't with us tonight, but he is the Chief Diversity Officer of the Town of Brookline and Director of the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. John Hodgman, retired, he's here tonight. Retired venture capitalist and Tufts professor who helped to launch the Brookline Education Foundation, the Brookline High School Innovation Fund, and also the Brookline Community Foundation Scholarship Fund for Brookline High School over the past 37 years. A great supporter, pillar of this town. And we all know and love Alicia Shu, retired 3rd grade teacher at Lawrence School with over 31 years of experience as a teacher in Brookline. She is a winner of the Brookline Education Foundation's Caverly Award for Excellence in Teaching and a member of the steering committee of BAFN. Then Minnie Koluri. Minnie moved in the early 90s to the United States to get her master's degree. She moved here from Mumbai. She has served as the co-chair of the Runkle School PTO. She is currently a senior class representative of the BHS PTO. Minnie is also a trustee of the Brookline Community Foundation and is currently a member of the Brookline High School Scholarship Fund Committee and also president of her neighborhood Fisher Hill Association. You'll never find Minnie 5 minutes in the same place. Minnie. And we have also had Kevin Wong, many of you know, who moved here from Connecticut, from Brookfield, Connecticut, and is an English teacher at Brookline High School. And then Chris Chandasilkit. She's a public health professional currently teaching and designing graduate public health classes. Chris is a Brookline Town Meeting member, a Brookline Library trustee, co-chair of the Brookline Commission for Women, and she insisted that I say this, Disney-loving mother of 3 young children. Okay. Now, I just want to ask, is Hee-Yoon Rothman here? No. Well, Hee-Yoon was last year's winner, and normally we have a tradition of having our previous year's winners come up to present the awards to this year's winners. So, Rachel Percy, can I ask you to come up here? Rachel won one of the awards last year. And Rachel will help me present the awards. So, the first award is, first of all, there are 3 awards, but this year we have 4 winners. We got a tie. It was very, very difficult to decide on the Creativity Award, so we decided to give 2. The Content Award is the 4th award that we will give, and this goes to Lana Chang. The title of her essay is Who Are We? And listen well, because Lana is a freshman at the high school.
I am Asian American. Half of who I am lives with my physical appearance, and the other half with my experiences. I am incomplete without either one of them, and that is what makes me unique. Being Asian American is not simple, especially today when racism is gaining more attention. But I believe that being Asian American means remembering our heritage, being proud of our identities, and standing up for ourselves and each other. Being Asian American means remembering where we come from. The parts of us that are engraved in our DNA are parts of us that we cannot change. No amount of plastic surgery can redesign our heritage, and because of this, we have to embrace our roots. Each Asian American holds a history of pain and sacrifice within them. Someone had to make the sacrifice of leaving behind everything they knew to give us a shot at a better life, so the least we can do is remember who they were. These people never celebrated Independence Day with fireworks or Thanksgiving with a turkey. They celebrated the Lunar New Year or Children's Day and ate rice cakes and told fortunes. We cannot forget that our ancestors were not the pilgrims but the emperors of dynasties, not those who suffered in the potato famine, but those whose countries were torn into by war, who invaded each other's land and scarred each other physically and emotionally. We do not have a beautiful history, but we have a beautiful heritage that we cannot and should never try to get rid of. We have to always remember who we are and what made us who we are. It is equally important to be proud of the fact that we are both Asian and American. Being part of 2 communities but being rejected by both communities at the same time is far from easy. According to society, we don't act Asian enough to be Asian, and we don't look American enough to be American. We don't fit into either category, but just hovering around between them is not an option. Being proud of who we are is the first step to paving a road that does not have to be just Asian or just American. We know that both parts of our identities are essential to making us who we are, so instead of hating that we are trapped in the middle, we have to be proud that we are different. Instead of being upset that we have to work to find a balance between the cultures, we should be thankful to have such a variety of beautiful traditions. We have to be proud of who we are because being both American and Asian is fundamental to our identities. At the same time, being Asian American means standing up for ourselves and each other. I remember a couple years ago, I was playing at a playground with my cousins when a group of boys came over and began complaining about how this group of Chinese people were in the way. I was seething, but fear kept my mouth shut, and I just planned to walk away. Before I could, however, my 6-year-old cousins decided that if I wasn't going to say anything, they would. They yelled back at the boys that we weren't Chinese and that they should get their countries right. I was ashamed that day because my younger cousins had more courage than me to say something. From then on, I decided that I would stand up for myself if it ever happened again. Just like my cousins inspired me to become more courageous, any one of us could do the exact same thing and help empower thousands of other people just by saying something. At the same time, it will remind people to think about what they're going to say before it could hurt someone. It isn't easy to step up and call someone out for something they said, but not doing anything will never make a change. We have to try to step out of our comfort zones to stand out for ourselves and our beliefs. I am Asian American. I believe that being Asian American means remembering our roots, being proud of our race, and advocating for ourselves and others, but that's not all. As Asian Americans, we have to look inside ourselves and discover what we value most, and through that decide for ourselves what it really means to be Asian American. Thank you.
Wasn't that amazing? Yeah. Freshman. I mean, this year, by the way, we made a very conscious effort to try to put together a group of judges with a very diverse group of judges, which we achieved. We also wanted to make sure that we have a very diverse group of sponsors. So if you look at the list of sponsors at the end, the final slide, 3 of them represent 4 Asian countries. And plus the Brookline Community Foundation and John Hodgman. Now, another thing we wanted to do was to increase the diversity of the students that would present these essays. And this year we got more than doubled the number of essays than last year. We have submissions from Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Sri Lankan, Filipino, French, mixed with Chinese, Jewish mixed with, so very diverse. But one thing we're very, very happy is that we were able to encourage, to have submissions from male students, from boys, because usually you always end up, with the ladies entering these essays. And so this next award, which is the Creativity Award, goes to our male awardee, Yi-Ming Fu, who will present to you his essay, Uncomfortable.
Chimes rattle as they push open the barbershop door, and I instinctively shrink myself. I do a quick scan of my surroundings. The sleek, modern equipment and beaming wooden floors intimidate me. Employees with sharp gray suits and edgy, pompous hairstyles work with a laser focus. My eyes are drawn to an advertisement with colorful Chinese lettering. By piecing together fragments that I understand, I slowly decode a weight loss advertisement. I turn anxiously to my sister and bug my eyes out. Here we go, here we go, here we go, I thought. I'm a Chinese American who has been born and raised in the United States. I consider myself very comfortable moving through life in Brookline, Massachusetts, in an environment where English is the main language, where I wear clothes that generally blend in and my mannerisms are appropriate. However, I feel ashamed of how uncomfortable I am maneuvering through my parents' home country of China. One of the barbershop employees comes to talk to my dad, who I wish to cling to like a little child, and I get the gist of what's going on because I've grown up listening to Chinese. Almost immediately, my sister is taken to get her hair washed, and my dad goes to accompany her. I am left alone to sit on the long, vacant waiting bench. I fidgeted, I prayed, I looked up at the ceiling and hoped nobody would sit down and talk to me. Then my cover would be blown. I am extremely insecure about my Chinese conversational skills, and I wish I was better. I wish I paid attention to and valued the many years of Chinese classes I had taken. In any situation where speaking Chinese might be applicable, my mouth has been glued shut. As someone who likes to blend in and is very good at doing it in Brookline, my brain was spiraling with possibilities of judgment and unwanted attention. My grandparents' town is a small and quiet one in comparison to the Chinese metropolises of Beijing and Shanghai. And as a result, foreign visitors like me are a once-in-a-lifetime shooting star type of miracle. Please, 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 no more new customers, I thought. And then ding, the chimes attached to the front door start rattling again, and I prepare to make myself small. I slide to the far end of the bench, stare at my dad's phone. I forgot mine at home, and I can't even open up the web. Searching something in English would blow my cover. I try to look occupied as a mother-daughter pair sit down on the opposite end, and there's an awkwardness I know only I can feel. I'm thankful as I get called to get my hair washed as well, and I follow the employees into the washroom. As soon as my head hits the headrest, the questions start flowing. Where in America are you from? Which country do you prefer? Which has the better food? A teenage boy, maybe a little older than me, leans over and asks, "Can you say something in English?" I introduce myself in English. I then try to make a little joke in broken Chinese. I completely flub my delivery, trip over my words, and I know the intonations were completely off. I want to crawl into a hole when I see their quizzical expressions. But I am no stranger to the justified curiosity of others, followed by the red shame that sometimes consumes me. Whether I'm an American in Asia or an Asian in America, there are always the same questions, the same exotic appeal of being different. There's always the same embarrassment of not feeling quite right. I wish that many times to be just American or just Asian, like that one awkward day in the barbershop. The liminal space that I used to squirm around in is a place that I embrace with open arms now. Instead of trying to run away from the individual parts of who I am, I need to bring them together in a way that makes sense for me. Now I have realized that being Asian American means everything to me. I can never squash it down or habookas away. It is my identity, it is my background, and it's the beautiful culture I regret not cherishing. Thank you.
How did you like that? Quite amazing, very descriptive. Then we have a second creativity award, and if you look up there, the title is in Chinese. And I had to, when this essay came in, I had to read until the very end because I couldn't read those two words. You know the title. I know, shame on you. Take him out of here. Anyway, and then when, in the conclusion, when I understood what those two characters were, I immediately thought of my mother, and was very, very nostalgic for her because that was what she would always try to say to us. That, you know, in English, probably American families would say grin and bear it, you know? So it's a little bit like that. So I'd like to invite Jocelyn Zhu to come up and present her essay, and I'll let her pronounce it. Okay, because I only know how to pronounce it in Chinese.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn. So the title is 吃苦. At 6 months old, just barely understanding the concept of diapers, I was carried to China like a precious sack of potatoes that cried at inconvenient times. My grandmother rocked me back and forth, cooing Shanxi dialect into my ears, until the pilot chased down the sun and landed into the next day. My early years seemed stitched together from such moments. Moments filled with the hurry of airports, the care of various different relatives, and the sound of unfamiliar languages. For it is only natural for a child of divorced and somewhat nomadic parents to be constantly traveling. After the school year whirled by, I would spend my summer shuttling between my dad in Hangzhou and my grandparents in Shanxi. When I went for American seedless watermelon to fresh lychee fruit in less than 24 hours, I greeted my family with sticky hands and sweet smiles. When I returned to my mother at the end of August with dirty socks and my loot of new clothes from doting relatives, we were often in a new apartment, in a new town, in a new school. Even from the very beginning, I was always in between parents, in between continents, in between cultures. What does home and identity mean to someone who doesn't have somewhere to come from, to someone who doesn't have somewhere to return to? Here in the United States, I'm American, but I'm not American. In China, I have Chinese heritage, but I'm not Chinese. People label me Chinese American, but that only means that neither country take full responsibility. But other people can't tell me who I am. So what does Chinese American mean to me? For a long time, I didn't know the answer, so I stopped asking the question. However, Brookline High School has a way of making you ask hard questions and discovering those answers. Our annual assembly, Courageous Conversations, caused my questions to resurface, and hearing other Asian Americans talk about their struggles with their identity forced me to face my own uncertainties. With my mind reopened, I went on community service in cultural exchange program to Shanxi with my Sunday Chinese school last April break. There we met a student named Gongjie, a boy my age. He lived in a rundown one-room shack with his family, and his parents collected trash and sold it as their living. At one point, Gongjie stopped eating dinner in order to save money for his parents and food for his younger brother. But he kept persevering. He was able to 吃苦, eat bitterness. His poverty didn't steal his hope for the future or his belief that the world was a wonderful place. He kept studying and earned the top rank in his class. Meeting Gongjie changed me. I was so proud that I came from a nation of people so dedicated to life, to learning, and so resilient in the pursuit of their dreams despite their deprivation. I was in awe of my parents and her Chinese spirit. I was in awe of how they escaped their cycle of poverty, and thankful for the opportunities I had in America and the freedom to more choices because I was not limited by my circumstances. For the first time, I felt close to finding myself. But I realized something. The distance between who I was and who I wanted to be was much greater than what I was comfortable with. Yet, I had a place to start. I wanted to strive for my dreams like my parents and Gongjie did. I wanted to take that Chinese work ethic and make something myself with all the possibilities I'm blessed here in Brookline with. To me, being Chinese American is the embodiment of where the American dream and the immigrant narrative intersect. Everything I come from, my two worlds and our two cultures, is founded on the belief that hard work will always lead to accomplishments, and that value is at the core of who I am. Yes, the US and China are still tremendously different in obvious and nuanced ways, and those differences affect the choices I make and how I perceive the world, but they affect me in a good way. For those differences make me a more balanced, more appreciative, and more empathetic person. Because of my Chinese American identity, no matter the hardships I may face in life, I'm not giving up. I will continue to work towards my American dream and shiku to get there.
Several years ago, actually it was a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, I went to the usual, the once a year round of the teachers during teacher parent night. It's always held in October at Brookline High School, right? And I enjoyed so much sitting in the class of Cheng Fu-Zhen because we were all there. I think there were a couple of, Asian parents, but mostly non-Asian. And Cheng Fu-Zhen explained that he gives homework every day. So if anybody comes back, if a student comes back and says, I don't have any Chinese homework, they're not telling the truth. And so at a certain point, he started talking in Chinese. And then everybody was, just going with the flow and not taking it too serious, etc. But then he said, no, repeat. That was very, very tricky. He did it every year. So, chiku, eat, bitterness. It's, sometimes I think, we learn English words, but sometimes there are certain expressions like this that are so worth for English-speaking people to learn too, because there's a whole philosophy behind it. So finally, we have, we're going to welcome Rachel Lee, who won the Baffin Award, and her essay is titled My Voice.
Hi everybody, my name is Rachel and my essay is called My Voice. I am known in my family for losing almost everything that finds its way into my possession, from miscellaneous collections of replaceable items such as chapsticks and socks to new phones and rented violins. Each loss would ensue a rush of frantic searching, a helpless feeling of never quite knowing where to start the hunt. The longest of these losses, the type that creeps up into your mind to remind you of its unclaimed status, has been my undeniable certainty of being Korean. It used to wedge within the gaps of my teeth, the way my mother's red pepper paste clings between thick pages of cabbage leaves, the way that my scarlet hanbok skirt sticks to thin layers of sweat on a particularly humid day. Every new English book I read was another Korean book I didn't read, and the words that slipped away didn't become a problem until I made it one. 2 years ago, when I visited Aunt Minnie's apartment in Seoul, I discovered that my 8-year-old cousin was now spewing vocabulary I was unable to digest. I would nod along, pretending as if her words flowed through my system naturally the way it did in hers, but I could feel each carved letter bleeding out. I looked the part of other Koreans, yet I didn't know the dates of Korean holidays, and their casual slang never imprinted in my mind. I was a shell of all East Asian stereotypes: yellow skin, onyx hair, squinted eyes, but my core was a blend of more than what the mirror promised. I would know only pieces of the ikukai of them, and yet all the words of the Star-Spangled Banner failed me too. There were 4th grade days when I would sit with my mother's laptop, regurgitating the right words from song clips until Rocket's red glare was perfect. Clean-cut, proud, American, perfect. Yet every loss I faced had a solution. Losses grew into gains. I learned that there is a richness to being rooted in more places than one. My family used to visit Korea almost every summer, and each time I would breathe in new pieces of the country I had never known. I would discover where my grandfather's old grapevines would hang, try new authentic delicacies that Uncle would take me out for. I would even notice how the neon signs glowed differently in Seoul. It sounds absurd, I know, but they do. I would indulge in spicy street tteokbokki, yellow fish cake soaked in steaming soup, learning to remember that the local market sold these treats every Thursday near the playground until it became routine. Yet when I returned home, I could still taste how salty the Massachusetts air would sit so alive on my tongue. Sticking my head out on the car ride home from the airport, I would soak up every last bit of the oxygen circulating Brookline, the town that had raised me, and I realized that there is something to be said about being made up of two parts. It was about being the blunt of dog-eating jokes, comments I would laugh along with because it's just a joke, relax. It was about finding a voice in a classroom that wouldn't see me as more than that quiet Asian girl until I learned how to speak up, how to be the living, breathing Asian American I was. This voice that I found did not have to speak in Korean, or even English for that matter. It just had to speak in the way I took every step, the way I laughed, the way I loved. It was about meshing the two languages when a certain word didn't fit in the other, or about finally not being embarrassed each time a new teacher called my Korean name off the roster and dreading the moment when I would have to whisper my American name back. It was about how I had always assumed my mother to be a person of shy character, always speaking in hushed tones with American strangers, until she walked the streets of Korea with me. There was an undeniable ease that she had in her native tongue, her speech void of all stutters or hesitation. It was about celebrating both sides of her. It was about loving the red, white, and blue, and it was about realizing that red, white, and blue are Korean colors too. That I can and I will be both. Thank you.
Now the judges, we met about 2 months ago at my home on a Sunday afternoon, and the judges and I discussed all these entries, and there was, all the judges were so impressed by the very high caliber of these essays, and made us reflect on how appreciative we were to have such a wonderful school community here, not only of administrators, but teachers also, and especially. So what I would like to suggest now, I don't know, can you raise your hands if you wrote an essay and are, yes. Okay, very good. So many of the essay writers, I tried to contact every single one, left countless messages and sent emails, but I was able to reach everyone until the very end. But I'm so amazed because these high school students have so much activity, after school activity, that many of them couldn't be here. In order to show how much we appreciate the amount of effort and they put into writing their essays, the steering committee of BAFN decided to give every single essayist a token of appreciation this year. So if I call your name and you're here, please come up. And Melody Zhou, Ryan Scott, Joey Mendoza, Brandon King, Sarah Kalabit, Vishnu Samaravira, Max Schlick, Noah Astley, Jeremy Sue, Callie Rabinowitz, Claire Duchenne, and Abby Spiller. Thank you so much for writing all these wonderful essays. I wish we could get you to read them all. still be around next year, so really, really encourage you to, take your pen and write again. Now, before we get to our guest speaker, what I would like to do is to serve dessert. We'll have a little break of about 10 minutes, and you can go and see Alicia Shu. We have a beautiful cake that we want to share with all of you. Okay, we're going to be very, very honest here. Actually, the cake was supposed to be at the very end. I was getting these texts from Janet Wu, who was at the seaport and got on the Uber, and then the Uber got lost, and then finally got onto Washington Street, and it took her 45 minutes to get here. So we had to trick you a little bit by serving you the cake a little bit earlier. I wish diversity wasn't an obligation anymore, that it was just a good and simple fact of life. As a child, I loved the stories of Joan of Arc and Robin Hood, but it took me years and finally Walt Disney to discover Mulan. I'm very happy this month. I actually went to Brookline Booksmith to find a copy. It wasn't out yet. But 328 issues and 28 years later, with a single blip in the year 2000 of Lucy Liu on the cover, this mainstream magazine called Allure, some of you know, yes, is going to put 3 Asian women on their June cover. It is the first time since 2000, and only the second time in 28 years. So we all yearn for trailblazers, don't we? Tonight, we welcome Janet Wu as our guest speaker, someone who is one of us, who sees and reports on this very complex world around us, but who through her philanthropy that inspires us by channeling her gifts, her platform, and her power to make things better for all of us. Janet is an anchor reporter for Bloomberg and an adjunct professor at Emerson College. Her op-eds and essays you probably have read have been published in the New York Times, Boston Globe, and there is a beautiful entry called Homeward Bound in the 2018 Norton Sampler of Essays. Homeward Bound, really, really worth the read. She is a founding member of She Gives, a philanthropic fund backed by women. Janet sits on the board of the New England Conservatory of Music, the Franciscan Children's Hospital, Home Start, the Boston chapter of the Heart Association, and the Max Warburg Courage Curriculum. Janet is a super achiever. She graduated from Yale with a dual major in philosophy and psychology. She's making it so difficult for us, those that follow her, right? And earned a master's degree in journalism and international affairs at Columbia University. She was named the 2015 New England Girl Scouts Leading Woman of the Year and delivered an amazing TEDx talk that you could Google online on resetting perspectives through solo exploration. She plays the piano, but not only that, she also plays the cello. And she's traveled 71 countries, 28 of them alone. Diversity, conflict, and information. It's the subject of the day, and that is going to be the subject of the talk of Janet Wu. Please welcome Janet.
I am so sorry I am late. I had to work until 6 o'clock. I'm a little short for this, so I just bought my other slippers to stand on. So you can all hear me all right? And I am already so impressed by your achievements. And it is a big honor for me to be here today. It's something that was very near and dear to my heart. And even though it was in the middle of the week and I have this new job, I said, I'm definitely going to be here. So thank you for waiting for me. Last week, I went to a speech given by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at MIT, and he said something that really struck with me. He said, "Never has a pace of change been so fast, and never again will it be this slow." You being here tonight is evidence of the significant global changes that have been happening in just the last few generations. Consider this, and I'm addressing this mostly to the young people in this room. Just being in this room, you are thousands of miles away from the place where most of our ancestors lived for centuries. If you had been born just 100 years ago, there would have been virtually zero possibility that you would be here right now. There would have been no way to even get here. So why are we here? Your answer is likely different from mine because we are different generations. For Asian Americans who are in their 40s and 50s, it's almost certainly not a pleasant story. My Vietnamese friends here in Boston were fleeing war and were lucky enough to escape their homeland. I hope you have Cambodian friends. I don't have Cambodian friends my age because if they lived there in the 70s and 80s, they likely did not survive the genocide that swept their country. And unlike the Vietnam War that Americans knew about because Americans were fighting in it, the world did not know about the massacres of the Khmer Rouge until it was too late. My own father was born in China in the late 20s, so his life was completely upended by everything that happened in the 20th century. Civil War, the Japanese invasion, and the Cultural Revolution. And as that country descended into chaos, he got stranded at his school. He was about your age and already studying medicine. And then that entire school was swept up by the fleeing nationalist army. He got taken to Taiwan, and he never saw most of his family ever again. 16 years ago, and I should actually add that in that time, he did manage to survive, make it to the United States, meet my mom at a sort of advanced age, and have 4 kids, and had a wonderful life, and became a heart surgeon who ended up saving a lot of lives. He had actually studied to be a hand surgeon while he was in China. So he had many, many blessings. Now, 16 years ago, after my father passed away, my family traveled to China for my grandmother's birthday. We were reunited with her after my father had no contact with his family for over 30 years. I had only met her 4 times in my life. A Japanese friend invited my entire family to stop in Japan since we were going all the way to Asia and to visit her family. So we stayed at their beautiful home in the countryside of Japan after some time in Tokyo. We slept on tatami mats and drank tea and spent really lovely evenings chatting late into the night. Now, one night, as we lingered over a meal, I looked over at our Japanese friend's father and I was filled with so much sadness because he reminded me so much of my own father. They were both, kind of smallish men. They would have been about the same age at that time, mid-70s. Both were quiet, academic, but also had really lively sense of humor, and both had decided to become medical doctors. Then it struck me, if my father had been alive, we wouldn't have been there. Not just that home. We wouldn't have been in that country. To my father, Japan was the despised enemy, and rightly so. They had slaughtered many of my father's relatives, and it would have been unthinkable for my father to be friends with the Japanese, just as it would have been impossible and unthinkable to believe that Jewish people in the 1940s and 50s would have been friends with the Germans. If you asked Americans back in the 50s who our greatest allies would be today, no one would have guessed Japan or Germany. But who are our greatest allies and friends today? I am just one generation from my father, and the Japan I know is among the most peaceful nations on earth, and I love that country, and I have many Japanese friends. My sister-in-law is a Japanese national. She married my brother before my dad passed away, and he loved her instantly. I also love Germany. I've traveled alone to Japan and to Germany, as well as Cambodia, Vietnam, South Korea, and yes, even China. And most recently, 5 weeks ago, Indonesia. all of these places, I would have lost my life because I was the enemy. Chinese people hated their own. Vietnamese people, depending on what part of China you came from, I would have been the enemy. So you think about all the innocent lives that have been lost today because of human nature and what people are scared of. And humans have a hard time changing. The same fear and misunderstanding that drove the Crusades 1,000 years ago is the same fear and conflict that is playing out today and what drives ISIS to kill their own. What humans tend to be scared of is what they don't know, and it's what they fear. And at the worst, people hate what they don't know, and they have a drive to get rid of that. Never, ever, ever let that be you. So can I ask you to raise your hands in here? Who has felt they have been the target of racism here in Massachusetts? So about 15 years ago, when I was already fairly famous from being a Channel 7 anchor, I was on a crowded Green Line train coming home from a Red Sox game. A woman started screaming in the middle of the train, "We let so many in. We let too many in. We shouldn't have let so many in." I turned around and looked at her, and she was looking right at me. And you can see this happening in the world again. The same tragedy happening over and over and over. And there wasn't anything that I could say to this person, except there's room for both of us on that train. The irony is that I grew up feeling not very Asian at all. I was born in Texas, where my father was studying heart surgery, and I was raised in Miami, where there were very, very few Asians in the 70s and 80s. Most of my friends were Jewish, and so even though I was raised in a Christian family, I felt culturally Jewish. I started exploring my ethnicity in college when I came up to Connecticut because that's the first place and the first time I regularly saw other Asian people. But I remember panicking when I walked into freshman biology because I walked in as if I were walking in the back of this room and I saw row after row of straight black hair. And I was freaked out. I said, how am I going to survive in this class? There are so many Asians. I forgot I was one of them. I felt different. And that was my struggle growing up, which what I can feel that you probably have at times yourself. That you don't always feel Asian and yet you don't always feel American. So what are we? So that brings us to today, and you being in this beautiful library with these amazing opportunities that I hope that you never take for granted. Be grateful for the freedom and the choices you have because you are lucky simply to be born in this time. Life may not feel safe, and I get it, and I understand it because it grieves me what we see on the news. But you are lucky. There's always danger. But I truly feel that the world is evolving, and I hope we don't see some of the things that we saw in the last century. I hope we don't have another Khmer Rouge. I truly hope we never have another Holocaust and some of the other civil wars that were absolutely pointless and could have been resolved with time. And when I think now of my friends who are Japanese and my friends who are Germans, I said, did we really need those world wars? Did we? And did we really need all those other wars when right now these people are our dearest friends? I went to China in 1990 after graduating from Yale to visit some Yale friends that were teaching there. And I remember meeting a brilliant student, but terribly unhappy. Now in the 1990s, so by the way, if you feel that things are competitive for you now, and I get it, they are, in China it's 10 times that, 50 times that. At the time in 1990, only 1% of all college-age students actually were allowed to go to college. Starting in elementary school, you have to take exams every year, and only the top 10% would continue on. So by the time you went to college, it was only 1%. So this fellow that I met was in the medical school where my friend was teaching in the Yale and China program. So he was the elite of the Chinese. But he was terribly unhappy because he hated medical school and he did not want to be a doctor. That was the rule that the government had chosen for him because he had tested out so well. He wanted to be a physicist. My incredible mother, who always brings us down to earth, because we were all feeling so, mighty going to our wonderful schools. She had told us on her first trip to China, they assigned jobs here, and based on how we test, we would probably be scooping buffalo dung. That's what we would be getting. So no matter what you choose to do in your life, never forget that you have a choice. Choice is freedom, and freedom is happiness. Also, a key to happiness is understanding. If someone understands someone, they do not hate them. If all these warring factions could understand each other or see each other, we would also know what we hear over and over and over again, that we are the same. Every year, you heard that I've traveled to 71 countries and I've traveled to 28 alone. Every year, I purposely travel alone to a new country. And I also somewhat arrange it, not randomly, that it's usually an emerging market. I don't say third world, because that's a little egocentric. I don't necessarily think we are the first world, but an emerging market. And what I'm reminded about, time after time after time, is that everyone is basically the same. They want to be alive, they want to be safe, they want to be healthy, and they want to love and be loved. They want the best for their families. They want to be secure. And it is wrong and evil to be so insecure that you feel that you can increase your security by wiping out other people. It never works. And that brings me back to the high cost of conflict. It's estimated the wars of the 20th century resulted in 200 million combat deaths, but potentially 1 billion people in other conflicts and collateral damage, like poverty and hunger and all the things that war leaves behind. We will never know if any of those minds that were wiped out in the Holocaust or the Khmer Rouge or the Vietnam War or the Korean War would have gone on to develop a malaria vaccine, discovered a new form of renewable energy, or painted a masterpiece that would cause lines out of the museum. We can only logically know from the sheer numbers that inestimable greatness and potential and brilliance were lost. So how can we avoid that in the future? Well, this is the bright point. This is where we have benefits from technology, because knowledge and information remove the ability to hide or suppress things. During my first job, during the first Gulf War, Iraq denied that they had entered Kuwait. But by the second war, when they denied it, we had satellite pictures showing that wasn't true. And we had satellite images of the oil fields that were set on fire. And even though many things continue to be hidden, you know that there is always a slow, steady march to the truth. And maybe not everything comes out in the time you wish they would, like the Khmer Rouge, but eventually it all comes out. So what is your job? Your job is to look at all the information around you, to hear all the information around you, and to act as your personal editor. You think about that information, you edit it, and you take it in and you consider it. Here's an example. A few years ago, I was giving a speech at the Yale Club in Boston. At that time, the Arab Spring was exploding. And I know you're young, so you may not be thinking about it, but this has caused a huge geopolitical shift in that part of the world and has led to a lot of good changes. A young aspiring journalist came up to me and wasn't exactly sure what the Arab Spring was, but asked me how I prepared for my job. And I said, really simple. It's how all good people prepare for all good jobs. And that is you read, and you read, and you read, and you read some more. A few days later, she sent me a note saying that her view of the world had changed and continued to change and evolve, and she was reading. And she vowed every night to do just a little bit more reading and a little bit less of what she calls Facebook creeping, and we all do. And you know what I'm talking about. I do this as well. That mindless scrolling through social media to quiet your brain, but it really doesn't teach you anything. So explore the world, even if you never leave your living room at a time. Google another magazine, open it up, read an article. We have so much at our fingertips. You can go to YouTube and see stories that are being produced by people on the ground, citizens who want to share their world. Make sure every single day you think about something that is new, that has real world implications. Because the more you understand, the richer your life will be. And keep writing, because that process takes everything that you think about, everything that you know, and everything that you learn, and it takes it to a deeper level. Thank you. I will now take some questions. Thank you.
Questions?
Don't be shy. All right. Good for you.
My name's Sabrina, and my question is, did you know that you wanted to work in journalism?
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved to write. And I went to a very liberal arts college, so they don't offer majors like journalism or business or law, things like that. So I just kept writing. And I actually had dreams of becoming the one form of journalism that I've never done. I wanted to become a magazine editor. So I went to Columbia for that. But then life changes, right? You never know. I was visiting my sister and brother-in-law out in California after I took that trip around the world. And I just knocked on the door of a small television station in Monterey, California, because I just needed a job. My parents had said, you need a job. Like, we've got a lot of kids in this family, so you need a job. We don't care what it is. Scooping a buffalo dog, as long as you get paid. So that was a television station. I thought I would just do it temporarily, but it just kept going. But the world changes. So now my latest job at Bloomberg, I'm working across all platforms. I'll be on TV, I'll be on radio, I'll be on social media. Bloomberg has a global streaming news service on Twitter called TikTok. They also do podcasts, and it will also be on the computer. So that's the way the world is going now. Yes?
In this era where we are fed news feeds online, all kinds of information, do you have suggestions about how young people, all of us, can develop a sense of where there's credible information, or how to judge what's not credible?
Mm-hmm. This is a really tough time because technology allows so much to be out there. And I beg to differ with our president when he says fake news. In reality, when you look at media organizations, there actually really isn't a lot of fake news. What you were reading was not actually news. It was created by companies. So that's why I told you earlier in the speech to act as editors and curators. I do not follow the Kardashians on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. I've never seen their posts, but I love following really great news sources. And it's not just the New York Times or Bloomberg or even the networks. And I'm not sure I really love the networks anymore, but things like ProPublica, which is an organization that does investigative journalism. I even like a lot of what I see on Vox. Ezra Klein does amazing videos. He did an amazing video explaining the rise of ISIS in 4 minutes, looking at the history of how it's came about, and it's fascinating. And it's better than what other people are producing. I love following public television. I love following the BBC. Organizations in Europe do a great job explaining a lot of things that we just don't get. But there's a lot of good out there. I love The Economist for good world perspective stories, but there's good journals everywhere. The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, really great pieces. I mean, the whole Me Too movement was broken by The New Yorker, and then it went to The New York Times. And of course it was Ronan Farrow. So the great thing about social media now, you can follow individual people. And again, edit out. The social media also means that there's a lot of stuff out there and sometimes mistakes happen, but you will get information you need. Just don't fill your mind with garbage. It's just like a computer. You say garbage in, garbage out. Try to lessen the garbage that is going in your mind, and you'll be better for it. Yes?
So you said that kind of life is a slow steady march to the truth, and in the end, finding the truth can be really rewarding. But along that way, that long, slow march, what do you think helps you stay motivated to the end?
Well, I'm idealistic. I cannot stand injustice. It makes me so upset. Every year I take a backpack and I fill it with all these things that we take for granted, like pen and paper and clothing, and I give it all away. Because I really feel the reason why they don't have pens and clothing and paper is because I won the birth lottery and they didn't. If I had been born in China, chances are I wouldn't have had a good life. My family took in a foster student from China. She's about my age, so 40s. And she played the violin. She's now the assistant concertmaster of the LA Philharmonic. And she said to me something that just haunts me. She said, my older brother was more talented, but he was born too early, so they broke his hands farming. And I don't mean to make this speech all about downers, but we go through our life and we complain about the most ridiculous things. And if you happen to live in Brookline or Newton or Wayland or Winchester, our life is a bubble because we're in Massachusetts and you are in these beautiful communities where you have everything handed to you. Our worst challenge of the day might be a really ugly pothole. But when you find something that upsets you, someone says something mean to you, something frustrates you, take a step back and realize it's not that big. And if it was something petty, let it go. Your life is great and has unlimited potential, especially the girls. And I'm not sure, did I answer your question? Oh, what motivates you? Okay, yeah, going back. And I just also think that world is fascinating. And I think what motivates me is I think today, we actually do have the opportunity to change the world. We do. Because we can be in touch with the world. Yes?
I just when I hear you talk, I mean your knowledge, depth of philosophy, I just speechless about you. I'm a first generation, I'm an immigrant from China, right? To me, I feel like lots of students today said, it's in between, like not Asian, not American, although I'm married to an American husband, right?
Yes.
But I constantly feel like a in between and a big twist.
Oh, yeah.
So how do so my friend, dear friend, still like Chinese friend, instantly connected. I have lots of good friend, American friend. I oftentimes, how do I get so break that shell, connected people? I feel like I have a hard time
Well,
to break that.
I feel sorry for you for one reason, I'll tell you why. You're in Boston. Boston's not the friendliest place, right? I mean, I came here 20 years ago and I was like, am I gonna ever have any friends? But you're lucky because again, the time that you are in,
Yeah,
and we have
people
our
are very inclusive, very friendly.
and it's become the issue that is the popular issue. Let's be inclusive. Let's have diversity. Yesterday, I went to the groundbreaking of what is soon going to be the 4th largest hotel in Boston. It's the Omni Seaport Hotel. And I loved it because they did something revolutionary with this group. They had their usual billionaire backers, but they decided to make at least 30% of everyone connected on this project. The investors, the contractors, everyone had to be a woman or a person of color. They are saying this is going to be standard. And I know one day we won't have to do this, but I think what happens is you bind with people the same way you bind anywhere in the world. You are patient, you reach out, you're not scared of rejection, you reach out and you say, let's spend time together. You take the initiative and then you allow things to grow organically. But you are lucky. I do have to make one little point about being misunderstood. So here I am growing up in Miami, where I was really on the fringe because, you know, the power base, you have a big, wonderful big Jewish population, wonderful big Latino population, and then you had sort of the, I don't know what you call them, the kind of Palm Beach crowd. There were no Asians. There wasn't even an Asian restaurant, nothing. But at that time, if you were ever Asian, people assumed you were someone's household staff. So I would go with my mom to the mall, and they assumed that she was there as someone's maid. Now, why you're lucky is something like 8 years ago, all of a sudden, I walk into a store, and instead of saying, oh, no, I'm just looking, they are all over me, and they're ignoring my white friends. The world changes, right? Who would have guessed that this would have happened? So my father's family did not make it through all those years, but he had one brother left, just one, and that man had 2 sons. And for the longest time, they were trying to get them out of China to come live with us because it was really tough in the 70s and 80s. But it just wouldn't happen. Well, they then became in the development of China. And now, about 10 years ago, they said, we no longer want to leave. It's better here than it is in the United States. We have far more wealth, we have far more opportunity, we do things better, our systems are better, our buildings are more beautiful, you know, our education and our transportation systems are much better than yours. We don't want to go there. So the world constantly changes. And I should add, people, no matter who they are, have their heads dangerously in the sand if they feel like they can stop the world from changing. It's not going to happen. And the change is better. Bringing me back to that first quote I told you about that Justin Trudeau said, that never again will change be this slow. Yes?
Hi, my name is Maya, and I'm a grad student at Simmons, and I'm pursuing a master's degree in library and information science. So I really appreciate that you're talking about diversity, conflict, and information. And it made me think of an article that I read in the New Yorker a few months back, and it was about the Google app where you can scan your face and it will show a painting which looks like your face.
Oh.
And the article was about specifically how it's racist towards Asians because so much of the art is by Westerners who transplant what they think of Asia onto their art. And so as a result, the app and the algorithms that make it are incredibly racist and will give you an image, if you're Asian, it will give you an image that's very offensive. And I also appreciate that you said that in this age and for our generation specifically, we should do a lot of reading, and as a future librarian, I really like that. But I also think that there's something more to it. I think that in order to influence and make change, we should directly influence the information that's being provided to us. Do you have any suggestions for how we as Asian Americans can influence the information that we see?
Don't be afraid to excel professionally. That's how you disseminate and share the information that you receive. Become managers, become the boss, become the editors, the journalists. Have a voice in whatever you do. Don't stay silent. I know this sounds very trite, but it's true. Hold on to your power. Earn it. Don't be obnoxious, but earn it, and earn it slowly. One thing that grieves me is that I decided to leave local television news because it's not financially solvent. So how they compensate is they hire extremely young people to staff local television news stations, so they don't have the knowledge base. And they hold on to a few other senior people just to make sure that it's not embarrassing. I didn't like that. So that's why I went to Bloomberg, because Bloomberg is very information intensive, very truth intensive, very analytical, and they don't care what you look like or how old you are or anything. They just want to make sure all the good information is out there. Not that I'm just trying to blindly tout them, but there are many organizations like that. You know, the BBC as well, which I think does fabulous work. But doing what you're doing now, write, publish, share. I didn't necessarily sit out saying I want to publish all these pieces I want to be read, but it's amazing because once you do publish something, you hear back from so many people, and what you create really does touch them, makes them think. Anytime you make someone think about a point, you've already changed the world. Different people take out different things in my essay. One line in my essay said, I'm jealous of the people that can pick up a phone and call their grandmother, or drive, a mile away and see their grandmother. And I had people coming and telling me, you made me stop taking my grandparents for granted. That is a little bit of change, not what I intended with that essay, but everything you say and do has an effect. Follow?
How do you think being Asian American has helped or hindered you as a journalist?
Could you repeat the question?
She asked how being Asian American has helped or hindered me as a journalist. Maybe I am naive about this, but I don't think it's really had an effect, to be honest with you. I do think that I can, or someone would extrapolate that I grew up with certain values that are Asian American, but I think it's hard to translate and make direct connections. I think that if you are ambitious, if you are sensitive, and you have a commitment to learning, those are the universal traits that affect your job. I wouldn't say that being Asian American particularly affected me, but watching very hardworking parents did. I saw their sacrifice and I saw what they do. That definitely affected me. I do believe that today, positively, we are becoming more colorblind. We are, and it's nice. We don't feel like you have to have a quote of this or that. I mean, if you watch Bloomberg News, there are so many Asian women, and it's fabulous. They really don't care. And I hope that it continues to be that. You want from over here? Yes, sir?
So, yes, there are many Asian American women, but how about Asian American men in media, in news?
That is the enduring conflict and a question and annoyance, and I belong to the Asian American Journalists Association, and this is, batted about all the time, and it makes me upset as well that there aren't more. And there have been theories floated, which I know you think about that. There are fewer men because the image is more jarring to the population, because our recent wars that people are alive remember are Asia, Korean War, Vietnam War. So I think there is something to that, but I will also tell you that I think even stronger of an influence is that not as many Asian American men are entering the field for a variety of reasons. I don't think that it is something that a lot of Asian parents traditionally want to support, because it's not a lucrative job and it's not a stable job. There's no stability. So I think that's why more women tend to go into it. And why I say this is that overall, not just with Asians, but across the board, more women tend to hold the entry level and kind of street reporting positions than men because of the financials that way. And then I also think that people sometimes think, well, it's something that I can do for another trend that I don't like is that journalism has become, it's bifurcated into either a very low paying job, in some ways it's a shockingly low amount of money. I'll go ahead and give you numbers, or you go on if you aren't in this room. My first job in 1992 paid $18,000. But the graduating class that I just graduated from Emerson, their starting job, $24,000. Okay? That's journalism. Now, you have these stars, but I don't really think that's journalism anymore. And then what you also have is you have people that really embrace the idealism of journalism, but they can afford to. Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt. Ronan Farrow, has a lot of money. And so I don't like that because that affects what is being covered, right? Now, of course, the idealism that we have as journalists, or that you should have as journalism, can ameliorate that. But in the workaday world, what is very sad is that journalism, because of the financials, you see it when you turn on local television. It becomes a very young job. Very, very young. I will say at Bloomberg, we have a ton of Asian men, but again, it's different because you have a financial company that's backing it. So again, you're assured sort of that prestige and that a little bit more security than you would say at a local television station, which, as you can see, I mean, turn on the morning shows, a lot of them are dual anchored by women. Men just don't want to go in there anymore. They go for the ego for a little bit and then they realize it's not financially secure. Again, I hope more Asian men do get in. More questions? Yes?
Actually, not this question. So sexual harassment in place. As a person of color, sometimes you wonder whether you are being racially targeted for sexual harassment. Do you have any suggestions or tips to offer to the young people?
So I haven't heard about minorities being targeted for sexual harassment, but I've heard of just women being targeted for sexual harassment. And interestingly enough, most of the women that have come to bear, at least in the media side, most of them have been white, right? I don't know of any personally. I know that with the Cosby case, there was some diversity, but that would make sense. So I think that this is a problem that crosses all lines. I don't think that this is a question of diversity. In fact, quite the opposite. It's sort of a universal challenge. I don't know what the answer to that is. I have not been sexually harassed, which maybe say, well, maybe no one found me attractive, or maybe no one wanted to, do this, or maybe it was something in my manner that made me so clearly communicate that it was not possible. I think that what I said to you before applies to all of these situations. It has to do with fear and intimidation, right? Because as humans, the worst of human nature is that you want power. We have all these people in the world, so everyone's already testing for power. You look at all the great wars. A lot of them was because they were seeking power and they were seeking resources. So the answer to that is you are responsible and you assert yourself. And you assert yourself by not letting someone take something from you that doesn't belong to them. And you also remember you don't take something from others that don't belong to you. And unfortunately, such a simple lesson. If we all learn this, the world would be such a better place. Remember, do unto others as you would have done unto you, or treat your neighbor as you would be treated. But it's a question, it's an issue that we all forget over and over and over again. Any more? Okay, then I think it's back to your cake.
Yeah, the students,
running over on the Uber, getting stuck on Washington Street. We wish you the best. We wish you the very best, Janet. And thank you everybody for coming tonight. I really want you to encourage, your friends, Asian American friends, to participate next year, so that Ms. Liwa Shorter doesn't have to go running around chasing and encouraging students to participate. And thank you very much to all the students for putting the time and thought into your essays. If anybody has a good idea about how to publish these essays, meaning we have 4 that we read today, but there are 12 that have not been read, and they are brilliant too. So if anybody has a good idea, just call me or send me an email, and we'll try to explore it, because I think they deserve to be shared. All right, thank you very much. Have a great year. Have a great summer.